So I just want to welcome you to the ongoing series on common sense Christianity. Now I have to confess, I'm a little bit forgetful. Sometimes I think I have Alzheimer's disease. I don't remember yesterday. I only know what I'm saying now, and that's all that matters. And if I don't lie, I'm in good shape. I don't have to remember what happened yesterday. I make a terrible witness on a witness stand. But some people seem to remember everything all the time, which is really bad. Who needs that stuff? It can't get rid of it too. It just loads you down. I just am a free spirit, so sometimes it's a little embarrassing because I don't know what the subject is today. But it was none can come to the Father but by me. That was one title I dished out. And the other one was, concerning Jesus. Another one is, judge not lest ye be judged. Which one would you prefer? Oh, we're going to have a war. Oh, let me just see that. Hands up about judgment. And hands up about none can come to the Father but by me. Well, I think I'll just mix them both together. I'll just mix them up if you don't mind. All right, well, let's start out then. Let me just see if I can make a place to begin. Because you can't separate the teachings of Jesus from Jesus himself, can you? Like he said, you honor me with your mouth, but your heart is far from me. I think a lot of people like Roy Masters, and they think that if they like me, that is sort of good enough, that makes them religious enough. Or if they like Moses, and they believe that Moses is a good man, and they like what he says and read about him, and give a buck or two to the synagogue or the church, that makes them kosher. It doesn't. And so I don't think that you can separate the Spirit from the Word. They should be one. You can't separate the man from his teachings. And in order to find salvation through the man, we're talking about my friend JC. In order to find salvation through him, it's important to follow what he says, because as a result of following what he says, you eventually find out, you mature as a human being to realize, well, his Spirit, and also the Father of that Spirit, our common Creator, our common Father, our common Parent. And so, the word forgiveness is the basis of Christian teaching. I know that it's in many other writings too, Hindu and all the Jewish and all the rest of it. But the forgiveness is a very important, as a matter of fact, vital linchpin of the whole spiritual journey. And unless one understands this, there's just no point in even coming to the talks. There's no point in opening a book, no point in reading, unless, of course, you will eventually, by reading and coming to the talks, grasp the significance of it. Because unless you do that, you'll never find the kingdom. You'll just die where you stand and never evolve your character. You'll never find the connection to God, which is Jesus Christ. See? You'll never find the connection. You'll never realize who he is. He'll just be a nice person that you like, and you give money to the church because that particular church, well, kind of agrees with him, and you agree with the church, and you have an intellectual arrangement. Therefore, if you like someone and you think they're good, it's almost like an art critic, You would look at art and you appreciate the art, and you feel very superior because you say this Van Gogh is beautiful. You think like, who was the guy that cut off his? That's the fellow, isn't it? Cut off his ear. And who was the latest one? The Italian artist. I can't think of his name. No, can't think. No, Picasso, right, Picasso. I mean, he might have been a good artist at one time, but I mean, his work stinks. But the point is, one can look at this One can look at any artist, good or bad, make a judgment about the art, and therefore one secretly becomes as good as, or equal to, that is, or even greater than the artist in one's own mind. So if you think that Roy Masters is a great spiritual teacher, and you say that in your heart, you have judged a work of art. You've made a judgment. You see, but in your mind, you're equal or better than me. See, because you are the judge, and I've sort of given you the renderings, the artwork for you to decide how good I am or not. See, and I'm not, I shouldn't be the object of a popularity contest like this, because it's kind of useless. But that's what you do anyway. So there are two kinds of judgments we got here. We've got judgment of good and judgment of bad. You judge a person good when you feel somehow he's a good person, and you've made him good. God has spoken. See? And you say somebody is bad, and you judge them as bad. God has made a judgment. Because what judgment is playing God. Now you may not realize you're playing God, because while you're playing God, you can't realize. Because the whole process of judgment the whole process of judgment is to involve oneself in the judging, in the knowing that one is a judge, and the knowledge that one derives a sense of judgmentship from, so deeply that you can't see anything greater than you exists. No greater God exists except the God that does the judging. It's sort of like judging diminishes consciousness of a true God and awakens in us the consciousness that we are good, the judge, a God. But we don't realize that we're playing God, because the whole process, by the emotional involvement of the judging, the intellectual emotional involvement by the judging, it reduces consciousness concerning something greater than us. See? It's a high and it's a low at the same time. Now you don't realize that while you're judging, there's a downside to it. There is. Because that has something to do with you failing. Because you cannot play God without dying. You cannot. It is impossible. If someone thinks you are good, you sort of come down to receive that, if I use that expression, to come down to receive a compliment, it could be some petty little compliment. It could be something, oh, how beautiful, how strong you are, how clever you are. If you come down to receive that, you come away from good, the truth, to be your own truth and your own good. You're coming away from consciousness and involving yourself with another form of consciousness on a lower level. It's like when you're dreaming, it is like Alice in Wonderland thought in her dream that everything was real. And surely you have dreams that are real, so real that you are frightened and you wake up and when you're awake, you are awakened to a higher consciousness, and then you see the images have not 3 dimensions as they did before. They have 2 dimensions, and they're just dreams. And it takes you a little while for your heart to stop pumping and your fear to go away, because while you were down there in the dreams were real. It's only because you didn't have a higher consciousness to awaken you to the fact that they're not real. Therefore you had a reason to be afraid. Higher consciousness. But in that dream, you are the only consciousness. And it's like that's all there is, you and the dream. And I have to tell you that when you come down into the world of dreams, the world of judging, you're coming down into the world of intellect, where you are the only consciousness. And you think you have a high opinion of yourself. You also sit and judge everybody and sit out there looking at people's faults, and you don't say anything very often, you just look at them, and you have the little smouldering contempt. Especially women do that. That's a typical female thing, by the way. Not that men don't do it. I mean, when they become feminine, they do. But you are involved in mind thought, mind stuff, dream stuff, illusion, delusion. And in that delusion, the true consciousness is diluted. It's almost non-existent. And the only way it appears, the only way you know something's wrong is you feel guilty. You feel depressed. You feel anxiety. You know, I had a lady come to see me one day. I never forgot it, because it was the first time it was presented to me this way. She was a very wealthy lady. She had plenty of money. She probably had a Rolls Royce. Everybody loved her. She had everything in the world. And she had this terrible anxiety and guilt. Like a lot of film stars, that's what makes them liberals. You know what I mean? They don't interpret the fact that they are sitting on top of the world, everybody looks up to them. And they've actually achieved the dream that everyone dreams of. Being put on a pedestal, driving a nice car, everybody bowing and scraping and showing deference to you. And there they are on top of the world, and they're absorbing all of this glory. And they have all this glory to themselves, and they're sort of caught up in the downdraft of it. Something's terribly wrong, but they can't know what it is that's wrong. They're too busy knowing themselves as right. It's a mindset. They want to be right. God never wants to be wrong. We always want to be right. So we have a lot of money, and people love us and show us favor, and never correct us and never cross us, because people won't. If you've got a lot of money, you're looked up to and you're respected. You have a lot of knowledge. You're very smart. People will look up to you, and that's the idea. You're programming them to look up to you and not question you and respect you. See? And so you buy that, and you leave behind the truth of what's happening, because you're buying a lie. It's a lie. You're not any good because people say you're wonderful. You're not a good person because you're a good artist. And you're not a good person because you're a good doctor. And you may be under the compulsion to hold on to the idea, the suggestion that you are a good person by working yourself. If you're a good doctor, then you will be working in the clinics 7 days a week for the poor. You see, you're under compulsion to do good for everyone, to hold on to the concept that you are good. Because if that compliment should stop, if you should stop, if they should sort of pull the compliments away, or if you should cease having money, or if you as a surgeon, you'd have arthritis in your hands and you couldn't do any good anymore, or if you couldn't work, your conscience would catch up with you. But you would misinterpret that as, oh, I feel guilty for not working. You start to resent the fact that you can't work. You start resenting your hands. You start resenting the condition, judging, hating, everything, blaming, cursing. Of course, your condition gets worse. See? But if you should ever lose all of those supports, if you ever should stop drinking and going to church and experiencing the reinforcement of your delusions, you will experience this tremendous anxiety. But you will also experience this tremendous anxiety no matter how much you can get, because there isn't enough of that wonderful stuff in the world. There's just not there's not enough gold and silver and diamonds and glory. There's just not enough in the world to keep your mind satiated with what it needs, the substance of its own sense of goodness. Because even so, it breaks down. Because each time you pump yourself up, each time you are involving yourself with the delusions, you are rejecting God to be God. And that's the sin. The original sin, and I believe there's an original sin, and I have excellent talks on that subject if you care to peruse the materials, the tapes I have. The original sin was rejecting God to be God. If you look, what did Adam do? He looked at the knowledge of good and evil, and he saw that it was good. It looked fair to his eyes. See, and what is knowledge of good and evil? Is that you can be a decider. You can decide if you had the knowledge, good and evil, you can be like God. You can make things happen. And then you can, through the things which happen positively, hopefully positively, you can say, look what I did, everyone. See, look what I did. I did that. I learned this, and I rejected that, and I accepted this, and I sorted it all, and I decided to act, and therefore, look at the world I've created. Look, this is my world. Look, I'm a great artist. I'm a great doctor. Look, you must worship me. Isn't that what you all looking for in your life? Recognition? Isn't it? And don't the psychologists say it's natural to all of us to want recognition? Isn't that silly? Because when you realize what recognition is, you see it's an ego trip. And it is a journey to futility. I want to tell you a little story. I remember when I saw how silly it was. I must have been 6 or 7 years old, and I'm walking down the street. I'm just walking down the street in London. I can just roughly remember where it was. Because there's certain events in my life I do remember. It's when I awake and suddenly find something awakens me. Sometimes it's temptation. Sometimes it's a spiritual moment where it's a milestone in my consciousness, a memorable moment where I remember that moment. It's important. This one was interesting. A Rolls Royce stopped at the curb, and I'm walking down the street. I'm 7 or 8 years old. I may have been 10, I may have been 5, I can't remember exactly. But here I am walking down the street, and this very, very rich person gets out with a top hat, silk scarf, and starts to get out of the car and to go into a building. And I remember it. The funny thing about it, I remember a voice from within the cab said, "Oh, Daddy, is Mother coming by train or by car?" I say, but then I remembered looking at that, and they didn't pay any attention to me. I mean, like I didn't exist. And I was looking at them in the hope of being recognized, like they were movie talent searchers, looking for. And I saw, then I said, look how silly that is, right? Has it ever happened to you, something similar? See, and I said to myself, how absolutely absurd. But now I'm happy that I could see that. I didn't do that anymore. You see? And other people will feel rejected and want it even more, start to be resentful, and that whets the appetite to be accepted. When you get rejected, when you get rejected, now let's take that little tack here. When you get rejected, that's another judgment, because after all, the king has been spurned. He's been sort of put aside. How can you reject? Here I am, everybody. I came down from heaven and you didn't recognize me? So you resent that person. Now you don't outwardly resent them because it's so silly. Because you can't do it outwardly. It's all inwardly. It's all silent. So you reject the rejecter. You judge the rejecter for rejecting you. You can't reject God and not get judged. Right? Look, you see how this can fit in your own life, because it gets very, very complicated in your own life. You get rejected by your husband and you hate him. And you try to get him to accept you, and he can feel you manipulating him to see you in a certain way, and he doesn't want that because it's not natural. You can only respect a person who's respectable. You can't respect a person who's manipulating you to respect them. Because that very manipulation is sort of like a violation of the person's soul. He is only supposed to worship God, but you want to be worship God, and you're trying to get his attention like you were God, and he can sense that. He can sense the unnaturalness of it. See, and then he resents it. And then, of course, you have a whole set of problems over there. And I can go on. The spokes of the wheel are so vast, I'm going to try to stay with the subject. But you see that rejection can cause resentment. Now, so resentment leads us to the other side of judging. So you got the judgment that someone is good, and you love them that love you, and you judge them that judge you good as good. See? And that's illusion, little world you locked into. But then, what that's doing, it's causing you a conflict with yourself that you are not able to see yet, because this problem has not evolved. The pain has not evolved sufficiently. There's pain there, but if you've got your friends and you've got your partying and you've got your circle, whatever it is you move in, see, there's always enough pleasure and there's always enough acceptance, and you can always do enough for people. You can always buy whatever you want to make you feel like a king. If people won't give you love, then you buy material things. You create your own little throne room with junk material. And it hangs like albatross around your neck. You go open your garage door one day and you can see all the stuff you bought. And has no use, and you get bored with it because it isn't enough. You keep having to buy more and more things, and things are not doing it. They're making you worse instead of better. It's addiction. When you resent the stuff in the garage, but you can't sell it because it's your world. It's everything you are. You have a love-hate relationship with the things in your garage, right? Or the fur coats hanging in there. Because in one sense, they've given you the feeling, oh, you put the fur coat on, and you feel like a queen, you know. and then, but you know, a day or two later, it hangs in the closet, and you feel like you feel like a prostitute or something. You feel dirty, you feel unclean, you start to hate the material things that they lied to you. But you can't live with them, and you can't live without them. And you're always looking for something new, a new experience. And that new experience is always the same. Around every corner, the turn of the dice, maybe you'll get lucky. And somebody will recognize you, maybe you'll find out who you are. And you will. You keep finding out who you are, you'll find out you're still a stupid jerk. But you can't realize it yet. You do realize it, but then you refuse to acknowledge that realization. You reject that realization by more king stuff and queen stuff. See? See? It's true, isn't it? Well, see, the laughter is the noise a fool makes when they see themselves, right? It's okay. I don't mean to be critical. It's good. It's a good noise. It's a good, healthy noise. Making joyful sounds unto the Lord. But you know something, just to add a little moment of, just to stop it for a moment in time and space here, I can always tell, I can know there's such a thing as a God. I've always known that. But how did I know it? Well, I think I've been able to crystallize it in just a few words. When you try to play him, you feel conflict. Now, if you understand that interpretation, anybody can, interpret guilt to mean anything you want. It could be an appendage from some prehistoric past that you've got to get rid of, like appendicitis or something, You can get rid of guilt in many different ways. You can interpret guilt to meaning you haven't done enough for people. And you're not getting enough love, therefore you have to love more to get to be loved. You have to find that greater love within yourself, which you think you have, to give to people, because you're just a lazy God or lazy king. You just really got to be more worthy of that love, and you have to show yourself in such a good light that people unmistakably will recognize you. So you work harder towards it. There's ways of misinterpreting. In Hinduism, the reason they tell you that if you feel guilty, if you have any guilt, the reason why you're guilty is because you haven't found your full potential as God. Just the opposite. Just take that little twist of concept and twist it around. The reason why you're feeling you are guilty is because you're playing God. That's the real reason. And you don't know it. But you can twist that around to some people's taste and say, no, the reason why you're feeling guilty is because you haven't reached your full potential of being God. You have to try harder. See? You're guilty for not attaining to that. Don't hang back. Try harder. It's like if a cannibal shrink. If a cannibal will go to a cannibal shrink, and the cannibal will say to the shrink, look, I feel very guilty. And the cannibal shrink, said, you know the tribal instructions, how many people have you eaten this month? He said, well, I'm ashamed to say I've only eaten half a person. I shared some of that with my kids. You know, I hate my wife's guts, and the cannibal will say, "Well, just eat your vegetables." You know what I mean? That wasn't a very good one, but that anyway. He will say, this cannibal shrink could say to the cannibal, "Look, I'll tell you what you do. You set your goals higher. You need to eat 2 people a month. See? And then you'll feel better." And so, if you set your goals higher, you are looking away from your problem towards what you think is the solution, and you do feel better. You eat 1 person and you feel better, but you're so preoccupied in finding that person to eat. It's such an excitement, such an intrigue. You're so caught up in the process. You can leave behind your guilt for a while because it's like a journey. It's like a hope. But when you eat the 2nd person, you're more guilty than ever before. But the cannibal will always say, the witch doctor will always say, but now you have to set your goals higher. And pretty soon your whole life is wasted, moving in the wrong direction. You could do that with money. You could do it with wives. Isn't that right? You can do it with respectability and being a good doctor or a good lawyer. You can do it. See? You work harder towards the idea of your own greatness. It's very dangerous stuff. The secret, of course, if you just stop still, that's what the meditation will teach you to do, is to be still and let the truth catch up with you because you're too busy rejecting the truth, moving away from it into some glorifying experience. But each one of those experiences is us playing God. And it's simply a rejection of God to be God. And the rejection of God, you see, is what's wrong with the mankind. We only give lip service to God. We go to our church and we sing hymns and songs. And oh, what a beautiful man is Jesus. And onward Christian soldiers, all that stuff. And we all come out feeling better. It's a fix. We got religiousized for one day, and some people boogie-woogie all over the aisles, and I tell you, when I look at this, I think, what insanity. But they don't see that they're insanity. Everybody feels good. Everybody glorifies each other. Everybody is in the Lord and love and feels joy in the Lord. They all feel like they're God. Every one of them. You ask them. Some people go into a church, and they feel the stained glass windows and everything exists because of them. It exists because of them. And mothers, fathers, especially women, they feel like they're the center of the hive and the whole world revolves around them. And they make sure the world revolves around them and make them everybody dependent, like the government, like welfare. There's so many variations. It's a sense of power, of beingness. And that beingness is being God. And there's tremendous guilt. And there are those people who help you to feel like you are God, the pusher. You have the illusion that you are something you're not. The addict has the idea that he's something he's not. He was a high. It's called a high. We're all high on something, music, sex, but the addict presents the best example of this. He has an illusion. Sometimes he thinks he can walk off a building because he can fly. He has the power. He has the illusion of being somebody. He is nobody. He can't see himself because he's got that illusion. There's no reality he can see by because he's too busy rejecting it through the experience. Then there's the provider, the enabler, the drug pusher. He's got the real power in the world. One has the illusion of power, one has the real power, and he gets power from the addiction of the addict by supplying the needs of the addict, catering to this idea that he's something that he's not. And all the dictators of the world have that as they're going for them. The Saddam Husseins, the Hitlers, your personal Hitlers. They all have the same thing going for us. We are weak. We are hungry for the idea that we're somebody. All the positive thinking churches, all addiction. You see all the addictions to various religions? That's what it's all about. It's an opiate. Everything is a variation of the same thing exactly. We're all high on praise. When we're praising the Lord, well, then we all feel, we're doing the right thing, and we all feel praised back again. And the preacher and everybody gives us a feedback of that we're doing the right thing, and we get acceptance for doing the right thing. And we suddenly we feel like we're righter than anybody else. And we're full of it. We are really full of it, I have to tell you. So that's the the positive side, but the negative side is judging. If you're not getting that acceptance, if things are not working, especially with the lady that came to see me, that wealthy lady, I said to that lady, look, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. I said, you have everything, but the problem is with you've got too much. You're puffed up with your own self-conceit. You have this idea that you're good and you're totally addicted to it. And I said, you really resent the people. Although you need that judgment, even though you need this praise and this glorifying stuff, even though you love it, one part of your nature just soaks it up. But there's a part of your spiritual nature, your potential of what you really should be doing, what you should really be becoming, which you are inhibited because of all these material things that you're addicted to. I said, that part of you can't come to God. I said, you have conflict because you're rejecting God to be your own God. I said, if you drop all those material things, and that's what Jesus said to the young man. Didn't he say that? Now, that wasn't an instruction for everybody to give up their material things. See, because you do work hard and you have to have a nice car to drive to work and you need a house to live in. You do need. He said to this rich man, he was very rich. He said, well, I've followed all these instructions since, what do I do to enter the kingdom of God? And he said, well, love God, love your neighbor, don't commit adultery, and don't steal, etc., etc. He said, I've done all these things now. I've done all these things. He's observed the letter of the law. He's got his righteousness by the letter of the law. He's like a policeman who got dressed up, a criminal that got dressed up in a policeman's uniform and got recognition, and therefore hides his criminality, and from himself too. See? And so, Jesus said, well, you've got to give up. Jesus knew it. He said, you've got to give up all those material things and give it to the poor, every bit of it. Because then otherwise you wouldn't be able to see. I'm just adding words in here. Otherwise, if you don't give it away, you're not going to find out how people really think of you. You see? Right? You won't be exposed to yourself. Well, the man was very rich and couldn't do it. He was addicted. See? And so you see that Jesus knew that this man was addicted to being honored. And it's an ego thing. And nobody who has an ego can enter the kingdom of God. You have to lay down your ego life. Now, that doesn't mean to say you have to go to extremes, like give all your money to the poor and everything. I didn't say that. Is that you can't get high on things. I remember a time, I've always driven second-hand cars. Even though, the foundation had money, I'd prefer to use the money for the radio programs, but I do need, I do need some good transportation. I drive 60,000 miles a year, So one day, my sons went to the dealership, and I had this Pontiac Grand Am, whatever it was, with a sunroof. It was roofs that come off, and there it was sitting in front of my house, right? And they bought it for me. And so they sat me in it, and they said, "Okay, Dad, how's it feel?" See, they feel like a king. I don't. I said, "It feels like a car," and I drove off. See? And they were puzzled about that. They marveled at that. See? I don't feel good. I don't feel good when I get things. I don't feel bad if I'm deprived of things. I may get a slap in the face, but I just feel the sting. I don't feel bad. I don't have a hatred or judgment. Oh, you've insulted God, so to speak, How dare you? You're rude to me. Words are not like sticks and stones to me, and material things they don't have any emotional effect. I'm not into that. My inclination of my soul is towards finding the truth that will set me free from my material reassurances, those lies, those delusions, you see. And we have to do this in a very moderate way, a modifying way. And so I know that you can actually have a rebellion like Rajneesh took the effect that material things had on people and made him so guilty, he made everybody give it all away and give it to him. And he got high as a kite. Everybody didn't understand. They had an unconscious rejection of the things they loved. A love-hate relationship. Well, I mean, you have a love relationship with it. You feel good, but the things that make you feel good also make you feel terrible. And then you just kind of, anorexia. What's the other one? Nervosis. Yeah, bulimia. That's the same thing with food. You think food. Some people think, well, food will make me feel good, and they discover that food makes them feel good. But instead of making them feel good, well, it does. But it also makes them guilty because they're using the food to reject God, to feel good about themselves, food. So now at a certain point where the food, more and more and more, they get guiltier and guiltier and guilty, they figure, well, eating is what's making them guilty. It's not eating, it's eating to deny the truth. Eating for denial, eating for escape. And so therefore they go the opposite direction, they won't eat at all. And they make themselves, some of them will die. It's such a compulsion. I'm telling you, material things you don't have to go through extremes. You have to learn the moderation in all things. Isn't that Paul? He that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all his ways. Whether it's sex, whether it's food, there's got to be a tempering. There's got to be when you're dealing with a pretty woman or a handsome man or buying a car or getting honors, achieving something and getting recognition, whether you wanted it or not, there's a way of understanding the dangers of that. Not rejecting it, but dealing with it in a sort of neutral way. If people say to me, Roy Masters, you are very clever, intelligent, feeling good already. But how do you know all these things? I think you're divinely inspired. A lot of people say nice things to me. A lot of people say terrible things to me. But either one, I acknowledge the fact, thank you, they do recognize there is something there, but I don't come down to grab it. I don't grab the thunder. Because otherwise I'm grabbing what is due for the Creator. I didn't create me, I'm just a vehicle, I just know that. So if I'm doing some good, it isn't my good that I'm doing the will of the Father. That's the good I'm doing, so He should get that. And if I come and grab that with my ego, it's dangerous. That's grabbing the thunder, isn't it? And so we have to learn that. So let me just modify this and give you a little thought. You'll find this in the lost books of the Bible, by the way. This saying is in there. One of the I think it was the last testament of Benjamin, one of the members of the 12 tribes of Israel. As he was dying, each one of them give this inheritance to their children. And one of the things he spoke about anger. There's a very interesting chapter on anger, but this in particular is interesting. He says, now my children, I'm dying, and I want to give you inheritance. It isn't money. These are not the exact words. It's just good advice. If any person should praise you if you were a holy man, do not be uplifted. If people, these are not the exact words, but close enough. If people vex you with cruelty and put you down and degrade you, do not be dismayed. Very simple. And he's saying that because those two extremes are ego conditions that are fed. If you get upset because people put you down, you're judging them. And the temptation is to puff up in judgment. And you come down, you fall for that judgment. And if people say, well, what a wonderful person you are. Oh, what a lovely hat you're wearing. Oh, do you really like it? Ooh, don't fall for it. Just stand back and you can accept the compliment. Don't let on. You don't have to say, I know what you're up to. You're trying to control me. I know you're kind. It's a manipulation. You just put me on. You're just building me up to let me down. There's actually there's a song that you only build me up to let me down. You remember that? Yeah. Exactly right. So you don't need to have all that thought. You just need whether it's a good compliment with a good heart, or a person who has a malevolent intent to play with your brain, to compliment you and pump you up with it and sort of blind you with praise to the next move they're going to make you dependent upon their praising you so that you want to hold on to that. You'll do whatever they want because once you come down to it, you're guilty. And once you tasted it, you got to have more and more and more, but you get guiltier and guiltier and guiltier, and you get the other person, the person who plays the game with you, plays it to the hilt. It can ruin your life. How many people know what I'm talking about? Everybody, right? All right. So I'm not telling you anything really new, am I? But I'm explaining it to you because you knew it was a problem, but you didn't know why it was a problem. You see? So it's those two things. Judgment is not only necessarily a negative judgment on people with anger. Judgment is also when you get praise. Because the pleasure side of judgment, the pleasure is as detrimental to you as the judgment of anger. The love is just as dangerous for you as the hate. In other words, if somebody loves you and you don't come down to, you don't interpret it in a way that edifies your ego, but you accept their love in a good spirit, that's not the same thing. And it could be innocent love you get and you misinterpret it. Men often interpret the innocent love of a woman for the man, and becomes very sensual and sexual and very difficult to deal with. It becomes very high-minded and heady. See? They misinterpret the natural love of a woman for a man, innocent love. So what I'm saying is that love is dangerous because it represents when love is not interpreted properly, or when it was received in a wrong spirit, or given in a wrong spirit and received in a wrong spirit. Love is two emotional legs into the earth, from which is derived a sense of ego beingness, a rejection of God. You become earthy, you become sensual, you become hungrier and never satisfied. You are loved, and then you find you're manipulated. You see the truth of that. And then you see what they're doing, and then you hate. But each time, when you're loved, you don't realize there's a downside to it. When you realize the downside to it, you hate, you judge. Again, you judge the person for manipulating you and deceiving you. Well, what you've done is deceiving you. That's what you want. You marry somebody for the deception value of their presence. If a man wakes up one morning and finds his wife as a liar, and he married a liar, he couldn't marry a real person because he couldn't live with himself. A real woman wouldn't play the game. He always chooses a woman that lies to him as she lies with him, right? See? So he wakes up and discovers that this woman's a liar, and that now he resents it. He judges her for it. He's actually chosen her for that purpose of lying to him, but then when he sees that he's got the short end of the stick in this game of lying, he resents her. And therefore the other side of judgment kicks in. So you have love in one hand, creating enslavement. Then you have the realization of it. And then you have the judgment, the negative. Eventually, each one produces the other. Love produces hate, and hate produces a need for more love. Because hate is always a rejection of God. Never mind, you feel high when you're judging, hating. You feel high when you're being loved. You feel high either way, and you can't recognize why your life is deteriorating. But there's always a conscience that's pursuing you all the way to the grave. As you're deteriorating in your judgments, in your deriving a sense of who you are from the earth, love, hate, hate, love, you're sinking into the ground. You're compensating with earth, the earth, the lusts, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the loves of the ear, and all the other senses that we try to even inject. When our senses don't work anymore, we bypass them and inject drugs into our veins to try to shock ourselves away from realizing the truth about ourselves. That's what drug addiction is all about. And so when you realize this truth, if it is interpreted perfectly, the way I'm trying to get you to see it, if it's true, it's true, it's not true, you can recognize. If you're looking for the truth, you can hear it. And if you're not looking for the truth, you're looking for some Hindu truth, go to a Hindu temple, and you'll find this other truth that you're looking for. Some people are looking for this other truth. They're not loving enough, or they're not hating enough. Yeah, you can be a Nazi and get all the pleasure you want by learning, being justified in your hatred of minorities. That's what prejudice is all about, isn't it? The more there's no love in the world, there's just hate. And you've become addicted to hating and destroying and killing and plundering and murdering and deriving a sense of superior, cutting people's heads off and having photographs taken with this trophy of dehumanized being to whom you are superior. Follow that? Making people's lives miserable. You see? Creating. Your destruction is your creation, but never mind. Those who don't worship you, off with their head. It can be, people can fall to those depths. And so, I hope I've run a gamut of symptoms here. The judging, though, can be positive, meaning apparently positive, but it's negative. It creates, each time you accept a lie, oh, you wonderful person, you come down to accept that, you're dying. And then the other side of it, when you realize the game, and when you're hungry for more love, once you get a taste of it, it's dangerous. You'll pursue it. There's no telling what you might do. Give your body, give your riches, to hold on to that illusion, because only when you're involved in that illusion is the pain of reality dulled, where life is bearable. And then pretty soon you're drained of all your money in your life, and you're in the hospital, and you haven't got any more money to give, and now you see you curse everybody. And you die cursing. Now there's a real love and hate, and if you can give up the ego love and hate, you can find the true love and hate, because after all we should hate evil, shouldn't we? And we should love our enemy. You see? But you can't do that until you learn that secret of, if people build your ego up, don't get excited about it. If people damn you, just take it in your stride. If you can learn that, but you see, it's very hard, because words are something you've built your ego kingdom on. Words have association with pictures and ideas and sensations and memories. They're evoked. Certain words evoke, like an old handkerchief, nostalgia, perfumed handkerchief, photographs, music. They evoke experiences, and you can relive them. And those are the triggers, those are the hypnotic triggers that suck you into your brain. And when the real experiences are not around, you can actually recreate them through handkerchiefs or photo albums and whatever, memorabilia. You see? Now what you want is reality. And until you are ready for reality, you can't hear what I'm saying. You can't give up your judgments. And Jesus says, judge not, lest ye be judged. And if you judge people good, you're going to feel guilty, because they're going to take advantage of you. You'll be serving that wrong God. You'll be loving and being loved, but you're being conned. You're conning and being conned, because you're not really loving a person for their own sake. You're only loving them to get you to love. Your love is a con job, and their love is a con job. What you're looking for is the lie. And the lie is coming into you. You're involving yourself with the lie. You're rejecting reality and involving yourself with lies. And you're beginning, your whole interior, imbibing the lies, believing those lies, is building a lie self within you, which that lie self is cause of the conflict. Your whole beingness is made out of lies. The earth, you compensate in the earth, and you also compensate in these lies, these delusions. And so therefore your conflict is greater and greater and greater. There's no end to it. There's no end to the suffering. So whether you're loving and being loved, or hating and being hated, there's no end to that. You've got to drop judgment. That doesn't mean to say you drop discernment. Because you see, you have to understand that if you understand anything at all, you have to understand how it is you understand anything at all. You see me by, look, I'm an image through the retina of your eye, and in your brain I'm an image. And the only reason why you can see me is because the lights are, by reflected, you've never thought, you don't stop to think that for 1 minute that the lights are on and you're seeing me by light. You just, if you just stop for a moment, you see there's one element missing unless you stop and think about it. When you in the street, walking down the street and you see the cars and the traffic lights and shops and everything, you don't stop and think that the sun is shining and making all this possible. It's making things grow, and it's making trees and flowers grow. We eat the food. All this activity is the sun is is the illumination of even the things that are of its substance. The flowers that grow in the light, and then we make dresses out of flowers, out of cotton. The silkworm eats leaves and makes silk, and we drip. It's a whole thing. But when you stop and think of it, the sun is shining there kind of unnoticed. And you don't notice unless you really think about it, you don't realize why you can see things. You just think you're seeing things. It's only when the light goes out, then perhaps you appreciate the light more. Oh, I can't see where I'm going. And everything starts to die. And that's you. The light's going out. You're trying to be the light. You're trying to live by your own luminescence. You're not walking by faith. You're walking by, sight. You've got one-dimensional. You've forgotten the other dimension. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that you've got to learn to discern. But you can't discern until you realize how it is you know things. How it is you know that something's wrong with you. You don't know something wrong with you just because you have decided something's wrong with you. By the same token, you could decide something isn't wrong with you, which is what you used to do, and it didn't work. See? And you can find some expert to say you're okay, which you believe, and it works for a little while, until you get sicker, and you need two experts. See? Follow that? I hope I'm not boring you, am I? No, I'm following a line of thought here, and I'm coming to a conclusion. So, I'm making a point of the difference between judging and discerning. There's another level of loving and hating. See, you can love your enemy, which is, don't judge him. If you could just sit back and realize that God is the reason why you have all this guilt is because you've been judging. You haven't realized the reason why you know things. You can see, but you got it all distorted. Because in your desire to be God, good becomes whatever makes you feel good. And bad becomes whatever makes you feel bad. But the trouble is, the people who make you feel bad are the good people. And you're rejecting the good in them like you've rejected it in yourself, because good people have this light in them and they won't play the game. They offend you, they won't worship you. They see you as you are. So you reject them, the good in them, like you've rejected the good in yourself. So it's not possible to have a relationship with good people. But the bad people who play the game with you, those look attractive because the inclination of your soul is such that you ripple out towards, as though for the devil, and he rises, as though you croon sweetly for his presence. You're always in trouble. One way, if you lived the life I'm telling you, the conscious, you could never get into trouble. Because you're not compatible with it. Because you'll be drawn to good people, they won't hurt you. Like you're drawn here, if I'm a good man, decent man, I'm not going to play games with you. Because there's a whole hour already. Wow, it is. Oh, so you didn't realize we were here a whole hour, did you? Thank goodness. Well, just let me wrap it up then, because I can go on and on and on and on. Is that whenever you're making a judgment, whether it's a good judgment or a bad judgment, and you're playing God, that's a rejection of God to play God. You see, it's a rejection of God to play God. Therefore, how can He save you? How can Jesus come? How can Jesus sacrifice on the cross? How can the plan of salvation be activated if you're still playing God? And you're doing it with all the knowledge. You know, when you judge somebody, you have rationales and reasons for everything, don't you? You're doing this with knowledge. He is good because, and he is bad because. See? And you decide that this is good because this is good for me, but this person is good for me, and this person is supportive. And it's somehow the ego has an affinity for those things. And it's a magnetic affinity for everything that's wrong, which is supportive. And then you can join with it, you to cohabit with it. And it produces this ugliness inside you which is causing conflict. An ugliness that never wants to see its own ugliness, until you're ready to see the truth of things. That you are not designed to play God, and you're not designed to judge, but you're created to discern. And you can only discern by God's light, not by your own. You can only discern if you give up the judgment, if you forgive. See, look, you can't forgive because, how can you stop forgiving? Because forgiveness is part of your judgment. It's a wrong person's way of always maintaining his right. You become addicted. You're always looking for the faults. Even in good people, you'll judge good people bad. You'll judge bad people bad. You'll judge bad people good. But you've always got your judgment. And it's blocking salvation. You have to learn to discern and drop resentment, which is the handmaiden is the energy of judgment. You have to look. I don't know what the other feeling is. I haven't got a name. I've got a name for one feeling, which is the resentment, which supports judgment. But I haven't got a name for whatever it is that when you get praised. I haven't got a name for it, but it is something similar. It is a similar little electrical thing that you come down to get. And you're going to have to learn to maintain your neutrality, and it will be like dying. But only the ego will die, because you will find joy in the Lord. Because when you are not judging, then there's place for Him. It's like having candy before your dinner. If you're filled up with judgments, and full up with pride and emotions and excitements and angers, if you have that as a fulfillment, then you cannot have the true fulfillment. If you don't lay down your ego animal life, you cannot pick up the spiritual life. You have to pick up the gross sensuality of things, the love and the hate and the love, until you die. You've got to be objective and discern. And discerning is righteous judgment. And you see, but it's an inclination of the soul, my friends, you see. If you don't have the right inclination of the soul, you can't catch it just right. And then you'll see good people as good people, and you'll watch them, and you'll see there's good, but you'll see there's good. And you watch a person, maybe he has a background, he has a difficult background. But you watch him, you see he's behaving in a very sick way, but you don't judge him and you don't hate him. And lo and behold, before you know it, the person sees you not judging him, feels very embarrassed, and turns around and says, I'm so glad you never judge me. I feel so ashamed. Because he needed that. He needed someone not to judge him back, to tempt him to judge you back, to judge him back, to judge you. He needed someone to love him, to stop this vicious thing he couldn't help himself from being in. And you bring him back to that same consciousness, because you have that consciousness. You don't play the game, you bring other people back to their consciousness. If people say, oh, how wonderful, they meet you at the airport, they say, oh, look, you're so wonderful, and they hug you, you don't have to have all that hug back. You can just be polite, and they feel a little embarrassed. See? Thank you very much for being here. We're going to have a little talk after this with questions and answers. This is for the video part. If you want to get a copy of the video, you're able to do that as soon as we get the production set. Thank you very much. Now you can tell me how wonderful I am.